In 2014, an exhibition by a North Korean artist opened in Beijing. It was shut down the same day, after a phone call from the North Korean embassy.
오히려 중국 정부는 북한 정부에서 원하는 대로 나를 잡아가려고 했고.
In North Korea, only a handful of people are permitted to paint the leader. Sun Mu was one of them.
그러면 그 북에서 내가 그런 식으로 그랬다면
And he saw what others weren't even allowed to imagine. Kobe beef from Japan and Iranian caviar. Hundreds of luxury cars that Kim handed out to his inner circle as gifts. And this is only part of what's really happening inside. Sun Mu was born in North Korea. He gives neither the year nor the city. Too easy to trace. One thing is known. From childhood, he wanted to draw. And he drew well enough that the army noticed. In North Korea, the army notices everything useful. He was trained to paint propaganda, posters, murals, portraits of the leaders. This was not a punishment, it was a privilege. A propaganda artist in the DPRK is practically elite. You get fed, you don't get sent to the mines. You live in Pyongyang, not in a province where there is no electricity for weeks at a time in winter. After the army, art college, then work, official and state-sanctioned. He painted what he was told to paint. And what he was told to paint was always the same. Greatness, power, victory. Kim Il-sung with his arm raised. Kim Jong-Il in a marshal's uniform. Soldiers with bayonets tearing an American flag. Children with flowers, laughing, exactly as they were instructed to laugh. In unison, not a single unscripted line on a face. Sun Mu painted all of this and believed in it. That is important to understand. He was not a cynical executor. He was a convinced artist of the regime. I thought North Korea was a great country, he would say later in an interview. I was simply hungry. The hunger came in the late 1990s, the Great Famine, which killed, by various estimates, several 100,000 to 3 million people. Officially, it did not exist. The regime's artists kept painting well-fed children with flowers, and people were dying in the streets. This is what the regime never showed on its canvases. Food queues where people fell and did not get up. Bodies along railway tracks. Children with swollen bellies, whom artists were forbidden even to look at, let alone paint. Sun Mu saw all of it. He lived in that country. He walked those same streets, but he held his brush differently. While he was painting well-fed children. In that same year, Kim Jong-Il ordered 200 Mercedes-Benz cars in a single transaction. Total sum, $20 million. Live lobsters were flown in daily to the train on which the leader traveled to Moscow. He ate with silver chopsticks and washed it down with champagne. On the return journey, Bordeaux and Hennessy Paradis at $630 a bottle. Between $650,000 and $800,000 annually on cognac alone. At a time when the average annual wage of his subjects was $900. For 2 years running, Hennessy officially confirmed, Kim Jong-il was their largest buyer of premium cognac in the world. Not a country, a single individual. There is a rule that every artist in the DPRK learns from their first day of training. A portrait of the leader is sacred. Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il must not be painted carelessly. Their likenesses must bear no crease or smear. If a newspaper carrying the leader's portrait falls to the floor, it cannot simply be picked up. It must be folded in a prescribed way so the face is not creased. Negligent handling of a portrait means public criticism and forced labor. Deliberate damage means the camp. A caricature means death. Artists who painted the leaders went through a separate selection process. They were given better paints, better paper, better food. In return, they signed over their lives. One wrong stroke and you are no longer an artist. You are an enemy of the people. Sun Mu painted the leaders. He knew the cost of every brushstroke. But what did it actually mean in practice to paint the leader? At the Mansudae Art Studio in Pyongyang, the largest propaganda art center in the world, employing over 4,000 people, there was a separate portrait department. One did not end up there by accident. It took years of selection. Background checks, relatives, degree of loyalty. An artist who painted the leader had to be clean not only in his work, but in his bloodline. According to defector testimonies, every official portrait of Kim Il-sung or Kim Jong-il went through several tiers of approval. First, the department head, then the party supervisor, then, for the most important works, individuals from the leader's immediate circle. They arrived carrying reference images approved years before. Any deviation from the standard, in the size of the nose, the angle of a brow, the depth of color in the uniform, was noted. All of it required explanation. There is a detail Sun Mu mentioned in interviews. In North Korea, portraits of the leaders hang in every home, every office, every classroom. But this is not decoration. It is an obligation. Once a month, an inspection. The frame must be straight, the glass free of dust. The leader's face cannot be shadowed by a curtain or yellowed by sunlight. A dirty glass over the portrait means an official reprimand. A cracked frame means an investigation. And the artist who painted that portrait bears responsibility for every copy. This is not an exaggeration. It is the mechanics of the system. That is why the hands did not tremble. That is why the eyes did not wander. That is why each working session began with a ritual. Wipe the canvas, check the reference, align the horizon line. He was painting gods, and he knew that gods do not forgive mistakes. But there was one more thing the system carefully concealed. The leaders' portraits were not painted individually. The masters of Mansudae created the canonical image, and the remaining artists copied it again and again for years. Some spent their entire lives painting the same face, nothing else.
거기 그 속에 살 때에는 되게 행복하다고 생각했었고 또 그 지도자들을 위해서 김일성이나 김정일 이 사람들을 위해서 죽을 각오도 돼 있었고 이 세상엔 북한만이 행복한 나라라고 그렇게 교육받았으니 그렇게밖에 생각할 수 없었죠.
Kim Jong-Il, whom Sanmu painted, is not a real person. He is an image assembled from dozens of directives approved by committee, edited by the party, refined into a perfect balance of grandeur and approachability. And Sanmu built this construction day after day, implanting in millions of people the image of a father who could be trusted. While he was painting the leader among his people, that same leader had built over 100 country villas across the country. He kept a cellar stocked with thousands of bottles of alcohol. He maintained a private cinema with a collection of over 20,000 films, from James Bond to Rambo. He loved film so much that in 1978 he ordered the kidnapping of 2 South Korean filmmakers, a director and an actress. For 8 years they made films for the regime, not voluntarily. Sanmu knew none of this. He knew only what he could see. Empty shelves, the faces of neighbors swollen with hunger, and a brush in his hand. Every day, the smiling leader on the canvas. At some point, those two realities stopped fitting inside a single mind. In 1998 or 1999, he does not specify the year, so as not to narrow the circle of suspects for the regime. He crossed the Tumen River, at night, to the Chinese bank. It was not a plan with clear steps. It was hunger and despair that outweighed fear. In China, he saw things that overturned his understanding of the world. Not at once, gradually, over months and even years. He still remembers the first, lights. Ordinary street lamps in a Chinese city, all of them on at the same time. Flickering lights, he would say later. Plastic bags flying in the wind. This is the rotten capitalism? Why so many lights left on? He thought he was hallucinating. In North Korea, there was not enough electricity even in Pyongyang, the capital the regime maintained as a showcase for foreigners. In the provinces, towns went dark for weeks. And here, an ordinary Chinese city, ordinary lights. He hid in China, then Laos, Thailand, and finally South Korea, 2002, 4 years on the road. But the strangest thing happened not during the escape. The strangest thing happened afterwards. In Seoul, he enrolled at Hongik University, one of the most prestigious art schools in South Korea. The free world, free art. Paint whatever you want, and he did not know what to paint. Over 20 years inside a system where every brushstroke carried meaning. Ideological, state-sanctioned, the one correct meaning, and suddenly, complete freedom. A blank canvas, no instructions. The first reaction was bewilderment. I asked myself, why did I even come here? Then he did the only thing he knew how to do. He took the same style, propagandist socialist realism, bright colors, sharp contours, monumental figures, and began painting on his own terms. In one painting, Kim Jong-il wears Ray-Ban sunglasses. In another, Kim Jong Un in a red uniform is being tugged at the sleeve by Tinkerbell, Mickey Mouse, and Snow White. The title, "Take off your clothes and play." In a third, a pale girl with rosy cheeks holds out a bottle of Coca-Cola to a sick man in a marshal's uniform. The man in the uniform is Kim Jong-il. The title, "Some Take Medicine." The first exhibition in Seoul, police arrived within an hour. Neighbors had decided it was North Korean propaganda. The artist was nearly arrested for anti-state agitation. He was painting a parody of the regime. And it turned out that even in a free country, no one could tell the parody from the original. That is how deeply propaganda had penetrated the mind, on both sides of the border. Beijing, his first solo exhibition in China. Sanmu knew it was a risk. China deports North Korean defectors back to the DPRK. He entered quietly without publicity, concealing his face even more carefully than usual. On the floor of the gallery, he wrote names: Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-Il, Kim Jong Un, in large characters in calligraphy, exactly as he had been taught in Pyongyang. To enter the exhibition, visitors had to step on those names. He knew that officials from the North Korean embassy in Beijing would come to inspect what kind of exhibition this was, and he knew they would not be able to enter. For a person raised inside the regime, stepping on the leader's name is physically impossible. The body will not comply. The exhibition was closed after 2 days. The paintings were confiscated. Sanmu managed to leave in time, but he had done it. He had stepped on the same names before which he once painted on his knees. He now lives in Seoul with his wife and 2 daughters. His parents remained in North Korea. He has not seen them in over 20 years. The distance between Seoul and his hometown is a few hours by car. The border is another planet. If he is identified, under the 3-generation law, the entire family bears responsibility for the crime of a defector. His parents, his brothers or sisters, possibly his nieces and nephews. That is why the hat and the pseudonym. That is why never fully in frame. A journalist once asked him, "If the regime catches you, what will you do?" Sanmu answered without a pause, "I will take my own life to protect my family." He said it calmly, as a person who made peace with this long ago. And here it is worth asking, where does the regime get the money for all of this? The yachts, the villas, the cognac, the nuclear rockets, when the country has been under sanctions for decades? The answer is in the basements of Pyongyang. There, a unit operates that the world knows as the Lazarus Group. Officially, a structure of the DPRK's Reconnaissance General Bureau. Unofficially, the most productive financial cybercriminals on the planet. 2014. They hacked Sony Pictures in retaliation for a Hollywood film depicting the assassination of Kim Jong Un, leaked internal correspondence, and destroyed 70% of the company's corporate computers. 2016. An attempt to rob the Central Bank of Bangladesh through the SWIFT system. They tried to transfer nearly $1 billion. A single spelling mistake stopped them. They wrote "foundation" instead of "foundation." They managed to steal only 81 million. Then came the era of cryptocurrency. And the scale changed. Since 2017, the Lazarus Group has stolen more than $6 billion. February 2025. The hack of the Bybit exchange. $1.5 billion in Ethereum in a single operation. The largest cyber robbery in history. The point of entry was the laptop of a single developer who was deceived by a fake request. The first millions were laundered within 48 hours. The United Nations has documented this directly. The regime runs parallel funds outside the state budget at the personal disposal of the supreme leader. Hackers breach, the leader spends. The scheme is simple, and it has been working for 20 years.